Good morning from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. The time is 9:43 on Monday, the 26th of January 2026, Australia Day. So it's a public holiday here today. And it's going to be a scathingly hot day, 37 degrees, and we've already reached 30 degrees. But somehow it feels a little bit cooler than it was yesterday because we had the most fantastic thunderstorm blow through last night, and that sort of took the edge off some of the radiating, billowing, expansive, stymieing and suffocating heat. But I haven't put the birdies out, although it's a lovely morning out in the garden this morning. I'll see how we go after the story, if it's not too unbearable out there, because they didn't get to go out yesterday, which they're a bit disappointed about. They're letting me know non-verbally. But I don't like to put them out when it's too hot outside, because I worry about them just keeling over because they haven't got the survival skills and acclimatisation like the wild birds. But I guess, I always have plenty of water out for them. I guess they'll be fine. I'm just a bit of a helicopter mother in that regard. But the wild birds can move in and out of the shade, and their cage, I can move that cage, it's on wheels, but anywho, we'll see. I'll see how I feel later on. I might pop them out. Today's Monday, so Monday's when I clean both their inside cages, so that has to be done too, another little job that needs doing, which I'll probably absolutely will do later. And yes, getting into a bit of a routine. I ended up cleaning my fish pond on Thursday. I normally do it on Wednesdays, so the last 2 weeks it's been on a Thursday. So I'm getting a bit pushed out of my usual routines, but we'll see how we go. And yes, we'll carry on with chapter 5, a treasure of spiders. One hot, dreamy afternoon, when everything except the shouting cicadas seemed to be asleep, Roger and I set out to see how far we could climb over the hills before dark. We made our way up through the olive trees, striped and dappled with white sunlight, where the air was hot and still, and eventually we clambered above the trees and out onto a bare rocky peak, where we sat down for a rest. The island dozed below us, shimmering like a water picture in the heat haze. Grey-green olives, black cypresses, multicoloured rocks of the sea coast, and the sea smooth and opalescent, kingfisher blue, jade green, with here and there a pleat or two in its sleek surface, where it curved round a rocky, olive-tangled promontory. Directly below us was a small bay with a crescent-shaped rim of white sand, a bay so shallow and with a floor of such dazzling sand that the water was a pale blue, almost white. I was sweaty after the ascent, and Roger sat with flopping tongue and froth-flecked whiskers. We decided that we would not climb the hills after all. We would go for a bathe instead. So we hurried down the hillside until we reached the little bay empty, silent, asleep under the brilliant shower of sunlight. We sat in the warm, shallow waters drowsily, and I delved in the sand around me. Occasionally I found a smooth pebble or a piece of bottle which had been rubbed and licked by the sea until it was like an astonishing jewel, green and translucent. Heat rash, people of Earth. It's how sensitive my skin is. Any mild discomfort and I break out into either pimples or a rash. Dear Goddess. Yes, my darling boy. These fines I handed to Roger, who sat watching me. He's my pretty bird, my pretty boy. He, not certain what I expected him to do, but not wishing to offend me, took them delicately in his mouth. Then, when he thought I was not looking, he would drop them back into the water and sigh deeply. Later I lay on a rock to dry, while Roger sneezed and clopped his way along the shallows in an attempt to catch one of the blue-finned blennies with their pouting, vacant faces, which flipped from rock to rock with the speed of swallows. Breathing heavily and staring down into the clear water, Roger followed them, a look of intense concentration on his face. When I was dry, I put on my shorts and shirt and called to Roger. He came reluctantly, with many a backward glance at the blennies which still flicked across the sandy, sun-ringed floor of the bay. Coming as close to me as possible, he shook himself vigorously, showering me with water from his curly coat. After the swim, my body felt heavy and relaxed, and my skin as though it were covered with a silky crust of salt. Slowly and dreamily we made our way onto the road. Discovering that I was hungry, I wondered which was the nearest cottage where I could get something to eat. I stood kicking up puffs of fine white dust from the road as I considered this problem. If I went to see Leonora, who undoubtedly lived the nearest, she would give me figs and bread, but she would also insist on giving me the latest bulletin on her daughter's state of health. Her daughter was a huskily voiced virago with a cast in one eye, whom I cordially disliked, so I had no interest in her health. I decided not to go to Leonora. It was a pity, for she had the best fig trees for miles around, but there was a limit to what I could endure for the sake of black figs. If I went to see Taki, the fisherman, he would be having his siesta and would merely shout, "Go away, little corn top," from the depths of his tightly shuttered house. Kristaki and his family would probably be about, but in return for food, they would expect me to answer a lot of tedious questions. Was England bigger than Corfu? How many people lived there? Were they all lords? What was a train like? Did trees grow in England? And so on, interminably. If it had been morning, I could have cut through the fields and vineyards, and before reaching home, I would have fed well on contributions from various of my friends on the way. Olives, bread, grapes, figs, ending perhaps with a short detour that would take me through Philomena's fields, where I could be sure of ending my snack with a crisp pink slice of watermelon, cold as ice. I love watermelon, but I've stopped buying it because every time I buy it, I buy it cut up. There's no way the birdies and I can eat a whole enormous watermelon on our own. So I buy the cut pieces, but do you know what? They go off within a matter of a few days. So you're getting them and they look all nice and fresh, but they're actually not. It's appalling. It's an appalling waste of money, and it enrages me beyond belief. So I haven't bought it anymore for the last few weeks because I just thought, why having to throw all this food that isn't even, haven't even had it that long in the fridge. I mean, obviously, I'm not very good about eating my fruit and vegetables, so I waste a lot anyway, but I resent when it's a newly bought thing that should be fresh for at least a week, going off in a matter of days. This is such a fucking awful, corrupt country. Watermelon is just one tiny sample of that. It enrages me. Probably the way around it would be to grow my own watermelons, but then I'd have the problem of keeping up the water to them. And the last time I tried to grow one, I did manage to get a melon, but it split open in the bloody heat. So it's not so easy to grow your own food because of the scathing heat here. And then everything comes, it's half rotten before you even tuck into it. I'm livid. So anyway, but yes, growing your own food is best if you can manage it. I've given up on trying to grow my own food because between the crows, the possums, the scrub turkeys who ate my very expensive freesia and tulip bulbs, little bastards, they eat everything. So you're fighting off them. I guess the farmers are having trouble too, and that's probably why they refrigerate the watermelons till they're actually rotten. They look so nice to get them home and you tuck into it, they're either tasteless or rotten, there's no in between. Dear goddess, it's getting harder and harder for me to survive and or thrive here in Brisbane, Australia. I wonder where I can go to get fresher watermelon, maybe buy it direct from the farmers somewhere, to figure it out where I can go and get some decent watermelon. Anyway, but now it was siesta time, and most of the peasants were asleep in their houses behind tightly closed doors and shutters. It was a difficult problem, and while I thought about it, the pangs of hunger grew, and I kicked more energetically at the dusty road until Roger sneezed protestingly and gave me an injured look. Suddenly I had an idea. Just over the hill lived Yanni, the old shepherd, and his wife, in a minute sparkling white cottage. In a minute sparkling white cottage. Yanni, I knew, had his siesta in front of his house, in the shade of his grapevine, and if I made enough noise approaching the house, he would wake up. Once awake, it was certain that he would offer me hospitality. There was not a single peasant house you could visit and come empty away. Isn't that lovely how everyone was so generous and looked after each other? It was like that in my childhood, you know, in the 60s, and I was born in 1965, so I'm probably more talking from about 1970 on, when about the age of 5 I took to spending all my time at the beach. And when I got hungry or thirsty, in those days no one locked their doors, we all walked in and out of each other's homes. So I'd walk into, you know, Mrs. Robertson's home, and I always seemed to time it, because I have a keen sense of intuition even as a child. She'd say, I don't know how you do it. How did you know that I just made meringues? Or how did you know that I just baked a cake? And I would just waltz in, and she'd just be taking things out of the oven, and she'd just look at me and say, ah, there you are, Tanya. Would you like a cup of tea and a meringue? And I'd be, oh yes, please, Mrs. Robertson. She was a wonderful mother to me, a better mother than my own, if truth be known. Not because of the meringues and the cake, you understand, but she was loving and tolerant of my strange eccentricities which I had even as a child. She was a wonderful mother to me. We comforted each other often. Really was a kind of a soulmate connection. A real mother who loved me unconditionally. Even when I was naughty, I'd say, Mrs. Robertson, I've been a bit naughty. I did this naughty thing. And she would look at me and go, and then cuddle me and say, oh, never mind. You'll learn from your mistakes. The time I pushed Trevor down their one step that led from their kitchen into their living room, though, I expected to get chastised, and at least smacked or told off or something. She just looked at me and nodded. She understood why I did that and what was behind that. He was constantly coming to, you know, whenever I was at their home. I think I was living with them at that point in time. I'd come on summer holidays from Australia to stay with them when I was 10. I think I was 10, 9 or 10. 9 going on 10, probably, because I turned 10 in April, don't I? Yes. Anyway, he wouldn't leave me alone. He was constantly trying to get me to go back to the family home where he rented the batch underneath. Mum had the whole house rented out while we were in Australia, and I didn't want to go because, you know, predations, people of Earth. So I pushed him and he fell backwards, and that was my finest hour, almost as fine as the time I tried to kick the ship's steward on the LNS because he wouldn't go and get a doctor, and my mother was almost suffocating with a very bad asthma attack. The 2 times in my childhood that I lashed out with violence against an adult, and it was not punished. In fact, nothing was said at all, because in each instance it was the only way I could get in the first instance, the only way I could get some kind of action, and in the second instance, the only way I could get distance and get to be left alone for a little while. Jesus, not Jesus, you understand, but she never punished me, Mrs. Robertson. Never a harsh word was spoken. Then there was many times when my mother would be on one of her rampages, and I would be hiding under Lynn had twin beds in her room, and she'd be hiding under her bed and I'd be hiding under the other bed, which was my guest bed when I came to stay and sleep over, which was frequent, you know. We were very close, Lynn and I, in that time period when I was little. My mother would come tearing into June's house. Where's Tanya? Where's Tanya? And you know what? June, Mrs. June Robertson, would lie. She never lied. She taught me to never lie too. But in that instance, she said, there's one time when you're allowed to lie, Tanya. Oh, when is that? She said, to protect someone else when they're in actual real danger. It's the only time I will ever lie. So I nodded. She would lie and say, oh no, I haven't seen them. They must be playing down the beach, which would have not been completely untrue because we were always down the beach. And my mother would rush into Lynn's room and quickly cast her eyes around and then rush out again. We would be holding our breath like people living in terror situations, literally. It'd be like, and then Mum would flounce out. Another time we just quietly slipped out the back door, luckily, which was not far from Lynn's bedroom. But that was risky because if Mum ran round the front, she'd see us. So, that happened quite frequently actually. Probably about 4 or 5 occasions. My mother would scream, I hope you're not lying to me, June. I hope you're not lying to me. Oh, they were terrified of her. I was terrified of her too in some levels. In other levels, I just knew she was just berserk and off her nut and, narcissistic, wanting everything now in her own time frame, her own demanding immediate gratification, instant gratification, selfishness and entitleitis. Fuck off. You know what? She's been dead, it'll be 16 years in March, and I don't miss her. I'd been estranged to her, I was there for her the last 18 months of her life as kind of some weird idea about duty that she'd programmed into me as a child, but we'd been estranged for I think about 10 years prior to that. Didn't miss her. There wasn't a day that I missed her or felt guilty or, had any feelings of sadness. The only sadness I felt was that I didn't have a loving mother that could support me and encourage me and help me with my children, be there for me and be a real mother. Never had that except for Mrs. June Robertson and those wonderful moments when I would, as I said, come in off the beach and I would say, have you got any merengues? You got any merengues? Why, yes, Tanya. How did you guess? I've just pulled them out of the oven. She spoilt me lavishly. I was spoilt lavishly as a child. All the adults were overcompensating for the fact that they wouldn't deal with the predatory pedophiles in the family. By the time Uncle Case came on the scene, although he didn't actually molest me, but he was constantly threatening me and being fucking lascivious and creepy, so it was a psychological form of abuse, as bad as being actually molested. So, it was awful. It really was beyond awful. So there were two predators in the family and everyone just danced around it. June told me actually, when I was already, a mother with Crystal and baby Crystal, and she said to me, so I would have been, if Crystal was a baby, I would have been 21, 22. I was 20 and a half when I had Crystal. So anyway, I visited June this particular time to show off my baby to her and get her to meet Crystal, and she was like family to me. And she said to me, your mother she knew about Case, what he was like. I said, oh, did she? She said, yes. She came to me, visit to me one time when you were still a child, and she threw her hands up in the air and tore at her hair and said, "Do you think it's possible, June, that he could be after my Tanya?" And June said, "Whatever do you mean?" She said, "Well, you know," she said, "he sleeps with any woman he meets. He'd even sleep with you, June." She said, "I was so insulted. I took it to mean that she thought I was ugly." I said, no, it's not that. You're not at all ugly. It's that he really was a predator. He would sleep with any woman he met. He'd send him out the door 5 minutes down out the door, he'd be chatting up some female. He really was predatory and sex obsessed. And she said to me, she asked me, she said, "Do you think he would do something to Tanya?" And I said that I hoped not. And we just stared at each other. She said, "She never worried about Trevor though." I looked at her, I said, "Funny that, isn't it? How she protected the main perpetrator." I said, "Case didn't actually do anything to me, June, but he harassed me mercilessly." She nodded. She said, "I had a sense of that." She said, "You would come and you would just be so quiet and so withdrawn and so very, very introspective." I said, "What could I do? Had to survive those bastards." She nodded. She said, "I'm sorry," she said, "I didn't know what I could do, how I could get you out of that situation." Well, in those days didn't even help that much reporting to the police because they were all culpable as well. Vile it was, vile. New Zealand in the 70s. People have all these happy memories of the 70s online, you know, they say, "Oh, man, the 70s were the best time." I'm like, no, it wasn't. Not for me, not for other survivors of child sexual abuse. It was a fucking nightmare. My former boyfriend's mother, Sybil, told me, she said, "I wanted to leave my husband because he was beating me mercilessly and withholding money and just being really cruel." She said, "I'd go to the police and I'd say, 'I need to leave my husband, he's beating me and the children.' And they'd just say, 'Go home, go home.'" No support for women in those days. She said, "One day it got so bad," she said, "I went down to the local dam and I walked into it and I kept walking, hoping to drown myself." I said, "Why didn't you drown yourself?" She said, "I got up to my neck and suddenly I thought, I can't do that to my children. What's going to happen to them? I have to stay alive." She suffered very badly from celiac disease, so she was unwell most of the time. So she said, "I struggled." She said, "There was no pension or single mother's pension like you got, you know, that you had that bit of protection at least." She said, "There was nothing for us in our generation." I said, "How did you all cope?" She said, "We didn't. We just day by day. She said there were a lot of suicides too. And murders, women murdered in their own home. Well, that hasn't changed, has it? Australia Day. New Zealand is the same culture, pretty much. Anyway, happy fucking thoughts. Don't know why I went down into that dark rabbit hole again. Ah yes, the happy memory. One of the few happy memories of my childhood was mooching food from all the neighbours. So I'd go from June's house. Sometimes I'd go to the Hoda Maker's house and they spoilt me lavishly with food. There was always plenty of food because there were 4 children. No, 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl, Rosalind. And when I billeted with them for 6 months when I was 14, while Mum and Case went on a trip to America and to Europe, I stayed with them, and my mother paid them for my board and food, and I had to pay some of the board myself too out of my pocket money, I think, to teach me responsibility, how to pay for my own board. And anywho, that I was well fed, very well fed during my childhood, and I was, as I said, had an instinct for it and would turn up just as they were, "Oh, lunch is ready, Tanya, would you like some lunch?" Or, you know, with June Robertson, I would often be invited to dinner because she worried that Lynn wouldn't eat. Lynn had this aversion to eating for some peculiar reason. So June said, "If you sit," she said, "you're always such a gastronomic child," she said, "and you hoe into your meals with great vigour and passion," she said. Then Lynn gets jealous and she wants to eat too. And it worked most of the time. And I would always say, "What's for dessert, Mrs. Robertson? Is there any pudding?" There was always a pudding, always. And she'd say, "Oh, you know, custard with peaches, or rice pudding, or bread and butter pudding," which was my favourite, or trifle, or pavlova. But then sometimes I'd get there and I'd say, "What's for pudding, Mrs. Robertson?" "Sea meal custard, dear, your favourite." She'd smile. I'd be like, "I'll be giving pudding a miss this evening, Mrs. Robertson." And she'd nod, "Okay, Tanya, whatever you prefer." But it's still going to be sea meal pudding. And I'd be like, "Today is not a very good day." And I'd go out in a huff and she'd laugh. Oh, she was wonderful to me. Apart from the sea meal pudding, she understand. Fortunately, she only dished that up on rare occasions. I don't know what that was about, since neither Lynn nor I liked it. Maybe you and maybe her husband liked it. Don't know. Just trying to get some kind of vitamins into us. Right. Once awake, it was certain that he would offer me hospitality. There was not a single peasant house you could visit and come empty away. Cheered by this thought, I set off up the stony meandering pathway created by the pattering hooves of Yanni's goats, over the brow of the hill and into the valley where the red roof of the shepherd's house gleamed among the giant olive trunks. When I judged I was close enough, I stopped and threw a stone for Roger to retrieve. This was one of Roger's favourite pastimes, but once having started it, you had to continue, or else he would stand in front of you and bark hideously until you repeated the performance in sheer desperation. He retrieved the stone, dropped it at my feet, and backed away expectantly, ears cocked, eyes gleaming, muscles taut and ready for action. Ah, yes, I used to love it when Beauregard was like that too. I ignored both him and the stone. He looked faintly surprised. He examined the stone carefully and then looked at me again. I whistled a short tune and looked up into the sky. Roger gave an experimental yap. Then, seeing I still took no notice, he followed it up with a volley of deep, rich barks that echoed among the olives. I let him bark for about 5 minutes. By this time I felt sure Yanni must be aware of our arrival. Then I threw the stone for Roger, and as he fled after it joyfully, I made my way round to the front of the house. There's a reason why I'm thinking of Mrs. June Robertson, because Lynn read me this book in their house with June knitting beside us. It was a beautiful intimacy being read Gerald Durrell by Lynn and June looking on. It's a happy memory. I have some happy memories of my childhood. It's not all fucking ghastly horror. Although the horror sometimes outweighs the loveliness, you understand. It's a constant battle in my mind to push away the ugliness and hold on to the few sweetnesses. The old shepherd, as I expected, was in the tattered shade of the vine that crawled on its iron trellis work above my head. But to my intense annoyance, he had not woken up. He was sprawling in a plain deal chair which was tilted back against the wall at a dangerous angle. His arms dangled limply, his legs were spread out, and his magnificent moustache, orange and white with nicotine and age, lifted and trembled with his snores, like some strange seaweed that is raised and lowered by a gentle swell. The thick fingers of his stumpy hands twitched as he slept, and I could see the thick-ribbed yellow nails, like flakes cut from a tallow candle. His brown face, wrinkled and furrowed as the bark of a pine, was expressionless, the eyes tightly shut. I stared at him, trying to will him to wake up, but with no result. It was not etiquette for me to wake him, and I was debating whether it would be worthwhile waiting until he awoke naturally, or whether it would be better to go and be bored by Leonora, when Roger came in search of me, bustling round the side of the house, ears pricked, tongue drooping. He saw me, wagged his tail in brief greeting, and glanced round with the air of a visitor who knows he is welcome. As suddenly he froze, his moustache bristled, and he started to walk forward slowly, stiff-legged and quivering. He had seen something that I had failed to observe. Curled up under Yanni's tilted chair sat a large, lanky grey cat who was watching us with insolent green eyes, as cats have a way of doing. I love cats. I love them especially because they can be at times insolent. Before I could reach out and grab him, Roger had pounced. The cat, in a lithe movement that argued long practice, fled like a skimming stone to where the gnarled grapevine twisted drunkenly round the trellis, and shot up it with a scatter of sharp claws. Oh, poor pussy cat. Crouched among the bunches of white grapes, she stared down at Roger and spat delicately. Roger, frustrated and angry, threw back his head and barked threats and insults. Yanni's eyes flew open, his chair rocked, his arms flailed violently in an effort to keep his balance. The chair teetered uncertainly and then settled onto all four legs with a thud. "Saint Spiridion, save me," he implored loudly. "God have mercy." He glared round, his moustache quivering, to find the cause of the uproar, and saw me sitting demurely on the wall. I greeted him sweetly and politely, as though nothing had happened, and asked if he had slept well. He rose to his feet grinning and scratched his stomach vigorously. "Ah, it's you making enough noise to split my head. Your health, your health. Sit down, little lord," he said, dusting off his chair and placing it for me. "It is good to see you. You will eat with me and have a drink, perhaps? It is a very hot afternoon, very hot, hot enough to melt a bottle." He stretched and, yawning loudly, displayed gums as innocent of teeth as a baby's. Then, turning towards the house, he roared, "Aphrodite! Aphrodite! Awake, woman! Foreigners have come. The little lord is sitting with me. Bring food. Do you hear?" I heard, came a muffled voice from behind the shutters. Yanni grunted, or wiped his moustache, and made his way to the nearest olive tree and retired discreetly behind it. He reappeared, doing up his trousers and yawning, and came over to sit on the wall near me. Excuse me. I've still got that little rhinoceros beetle, whatever it is, mandible. Don't know what to do with it, so it just sits on my windowsill like a weird, macabre little trophy. Oh, iPhone focus for a change. That's nice. Right, you see the cute little things inside? Don't know what they are. Strange gifts from sacred space at Titania's realm. But I love how it's black, but it's so very shiny, as though it's been polished. That's how it appeared to me. It's still got the shine, hasn't lost its sheen. Come on, focus. Aha. No, it did for a moment, didn't it? There we go. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it yet. Probably end up throwing it out eventually. I was scared of it when I first found it in my waterfall of my fish pond. I actually screamed and threw it out. It still had all the, guts and everything still attached to it. Threw it out, and then it appeared a week later, kicked out probably by the turkeys or gifted to me by the fairies here on Sacred Space. Just how they gifted me Charlie's beak, bottom of her beak, her lower mandible. No, that's not the lower, it was the upper. But anyway, people of Earth, things get presented to me and it doesn't always make a lot of sense, actually. Although Charlie's gift getting gifted to me was astonishingly supernatural, because I was ordered to go out and make offerings, and it was in the process of making offerings that I turned and saw that Charlie's little grave had been dug up, and saw that bit of her beak sitting on top of the earth. Otherwise I would never have noticed it in a million trillion years. So there you go. Then I was ordered to turn it into a pendant, and I worked on it all that day, late into the night, to the point that I was so exhausted I was shaking with exhaustion. Spirit said, nope, you're going to finish it, you're going to finish it tonight. They were determined that I have that pendant. And anyway, it's a beautiful gift in a way, because it doesn't bring my Charlie back though, but it's a wonderful memento mori of her. Right. And not long after, these two little birdie boys came into my life. You're so quiet, little Bo. He was singing the most beautiful song when I was getting up this morning. He was singing his little heart out. You should be singing songs, Bo. He's listening and he's moving his little cheeks, but he's not making any sounds. Right, where did we segue, people of Earth? He just had a pee. Right. Today I should have taken my goats to Gasturi, but it was too hot, much too hot. And the hills of rocks will be so hot you could light a cigarette from them. So I went instead and tasted Taki's new white wine. Spiridion. What a wine! Like the blood of a dragon and as smooth as a fish. What a wine! When I came back, the air was full of sleep. So here I am. He sighed deeply but impenitently, and fumbled in his pocket for his battered tin of tobacco and thin grey cigarette papers. His brown, calloused hand cupped to catch the little pile of golden leaf, and the fingers of his other hand tugged and pulled at it gently. He rolled the cigarette swiftly, nipped off the tobacco that dangled from the ends, and replaced it in the tin, and then lit his smoke with the aid of a huge tin lighter from which a wick curled like an angry snake. He puffed reflectively for a moment, pulled a shred of tobacco off his moustache, and reached into his pocket again. That used to be one of my favourite things as a child, watching the few smokers that were in our neighbourhood having the same kind of ritual, rolling their own cigarettes and smoking them. Or sometimes Mr. Hodemakers smoked a pipe, and I would watch him pack his pipe. Was it Mr. Hodemakers that smoked a pipe? He didn't smoke very often. I remember that was a rarity. Or do I remember that wrongly? No, it was Mr. Coleman that smoked from a pipe, and I would watch him. They were the neighbours that lived between my house, Mrs. Effie Walker's little cottage next door, and then the next house was the Colemans, who were Jewish, although they never discussed their religion. They were very secular. But it was my mother that said that they were Jewish from England. She said they never discuss religion. Don't bring up religion around them. They'll get quite cross, Tanya. Anyway, Mr. Coleman smoked a pipe, and I would sit there watching him fascinated. And for me, I think because he knew I was watching him fascinated, he would blow smoke rings and I would watch the rings. And I found that really quite delightful and magical. They were reasonably good people to me. They weren't my favourites because on one or two occasions when I can't remember for what reason, but I slept over there and I had a bath, and Mrs. Coleman flew into a shrieking screech at me because I didn't dry between my toes, and she said I would get toe fungus. Well, she's right about that. I've battled toe fungus for 10 fucking years, the last 10 years of my life. And every morning I put special oil on that I hand blend on my toes to try and stave it off, and eventually the nails are growing out. But it's been a long, hard battle, that. But she was fastidious and convinced that as a child I would get toe fungus, but I never did get it. It's kind of to do with your immune system, some kind of autoimmune deficiency when you constantly suffer with toe fungus. And I've battled it for 10 fucking years. But it's improving. I wonder if part of the reason why it's improving is because of CPAP and being fully oxygenated and, getting healthier inside my core. Maybe. I'd like to believe that. But I still remember her screaming, "Why didn't you dry between your toes, Tiny? You'll get toe fungus. And it's life-threatening," and off she shrieked, and on she went, to the point where if you shriek at me like that, I get oppositional defiant, and I don't give a fuck, and I do whatever I want, whatever. And toe fungus is a thing, people. It's very hard to eliminate too once you've got it. I keep looking at my toes, very self-conscious about it. It's always just my 2 big toenails though. The other little toenails are fine, so it's a bit odd. But I walk barefoot in my garden all the time, so very likely reinfecting all the time, reinfesting all the time from the grass and the soil and the subtropics and the humidity and the mould and God knows what else is going on this land. They put so much poison here. It's amazing I'm alive at all, quite frankly. They put termite poisons on this house and garden when I first moved in. All my little baby guinea pigs and kittens were stillborn or with birth defects. It was awful, awful. I should have reported it actually to environmental department of whatever department that, I don't even know who to report to, but it was awful. And then 10 years later they came and sprayed again, and then all my chickens kept dying, I just couldn't work it out. But I did see BCC spraying. I watched them do it. A few years after my last hen died, I thought, that's what's killed my pet hens. It was drifting across, and because they peck in the grass and free range, they were absorbing and eating whatever garbage they were putting out on the verge. It's really foul. Excuse my pun. That's why I haven't got chickens again. It was just too traumatic. Just too bloody traumatic. Being poisoned. And I'm being poisoned along with it, by the way. It's not just the animals impacted. I'm even a bit nervous about putting the birds outside in the outside cage, although they're off the ground, But nothing feels safe here anymore. Nothing. Right, where were we? Oh yes, smoking. Yes, my grandmother, Connie Phillips, Constance Goddard Phillips, née Huxford, she rolled her own cigarettes too. She had a special little machine to roll, and I would watch it all fascinated. Didn't see her very often in my childhood, but when I did, I was fascinated with her ritualized making of cigarettes, rolling her own cigarettes and picking off the loose tobacco and smoking them. Here, you are interested in the little ones of God. Look at this that I caught this morning, crouching under a rock, like the devil, he said, pulling from his pocket a tiny bottle firmly corked and filled with golden olive oil. A fine one this, a fighter, the only fighter I know who can do damage with his backside. He hasn't met a wombat. They dig with their backsides. The bottle, filled to the brim with oil, looked as though it were made of pale amber, and enshrined in the centre, held, suspended by the thickness of the oil, was a small chocolate brown scorpion, his tail curved like a scimitar over his back. He was quite dead, suffocated by the glutinous grave. Around his corpse was a faint wisp of discoloration, like a mist in the golden oil. See that, said Yanni. That's the poison. He was full of that one. I asked curiously why it was necessary to put the scorpion in oil. Yanni chuckled richly and wiped his moustache. You do not know, little lord, though you spend all your time on your stomach catching these things, eh? He said, greatly amused. Well, I will tell you. You never know. It may be of use to you. First, catch the scorpion. Catch him alive and catch him as gently as a falling feather. Then you put him alive, mark you, alive, in a bottle of oil. Let him simmer, let him die in it. Let the sweet oil soak up the poison. Then, should you ever be stung by one of his brothers, and Saint Spiridion protect you from that, you must rub the place with that oil. That will cure the sting for you, so that it is of no more discomfort than the prick of a thorn. While I digested this curious information, Aphrodite appeared from the house, her wrinkled face as red as a pomegranate seed, bearing a tin tray on which was a bottle of wine, a jug of water, and a plate with bread, olives, and figs on it. Makes me want to go to Greece right now. Take me to Greece, someone. Keep dreaming, psychedelic dreamer. Keep dreaming the impossible dream. Yanni and I drank the wine, watered to a delicate pale pink, and ate the food in silence. In spite of his toothless gums, Yanni tore large pieces of the bread off and champed them hungrily, swallowing great lumps that made his wrinkled throat swell. It makes me laugh because that's how my father looked when he ate too. Probably I do too. Well, if you're going to eat, eat and enjoy. When we had finished, he sat back, wiped his moustache carefully, and took up the conversation again, as if there had been no pause. I knew a man once, a shepherd like myself, who had been to a fiesta in a distant village. On the way back, as his stomach was warm with wine, he decided to have a sleep. So he found a spot beneath some myrtles. But while he slept, a scorpion crept out from under the leaves and crawled into his ear. And when he awoke, it stung him. Sounds nasty. Yanni paused at the psychological moment to spit over the wall and roll himself another cigarette. Yes, he sighed at last. It was very sad, one so young. The tiny scorpion stung him in the ear. Like that. The poor fellow flung himself about in his agony. He ran screaming through the olives, tearing at his head. Oh, it was dreadful. There was no one to hear his cries and help him. No one at all. In terrible pain, he started to run for the village, but he never reached it. He fell down dead, down there in the valley, not far from the road. We found him the next morning when they were going to the fields. Oh, what a sight, what a sight! With that one little bite, his head had swollen up as though his brains were pregnant, and he was dead. Quite dead. Which would have been an extraordinarily painful way to die, by the way. It's like when I caught bacterial meningitis in the hot pools at Rotorua. 4 other children died that day. My parents were driving back from Rotorua to Wellington, where we lived, with my head swelled double its normal size. I'm sitting in the back seat, drifting as I still tend to drift people, but in that case in and out of consciousness, while they screamed constantly about where to find a doctor or a hospital. 4 hours of driving and them screaming. Was it 4 hours or 3 hours? I think it was 3 hours. Let's stick to the facts, people of Earth. But anyway, 3 or 4 hours, I can't remember. But that's all I remember from that. I don't remember being taken to hospital. I don't remember anything. I was only told later by my mother that I was lucky to be alive because 4 other children died from that same hot pool in Rotorua on that same day. By the gods. She must have felt guilty that she bothered to pass on that information to me. Or was it some kind of sadistic glee? Can never tell with her, you really couldn't. But anyway, I didn't die, but I remember the feeling of my brain swelling inside my skull and pressing up against the roof, my cranium, and feeling like I was just going to, there was no room left and that I was going to explode, and the pain was terrible, and the feeling of being there but not there already between worlds. You know that feeling only too well, people of Earth. When I tell you that I'm drifting or that I'm between worlds, sit up and take notice, because that's often when the spirits jump in with their little messages, isn't it? See me turn my head and start listening to things that can't be seen. I don't see them either, but I can hear them from time to time. But there's times when I walk around as if I'm not quite embodied and out of my body. I feel quite disconnected or untethered, and you just have to go with the flow when it's like that, people of Earth. Yanni sighed deeply and lugubriously, twirling the little bottle of oil in his fingers. "And that is why," he went on, "I never go up in the hills and sleep. And in case I should perhaps share some wine with a friend and forget the danger, I always carry a scorpion bottle with me." I wonder if that really works. Just sounds a little bit too much like sympathetic magic rather than an actual pharmaceutical type remedy. It's a bit strange. The talk drifted to other and equally absorbing topics, and after an hour or so I rose, dusted the crumbs off my lap, thanked the old man and his wife for their hospitality, accepted a bunch of grapes as a parting present, and set off. It's quite a long chapter, this one. And set off towards home. Roger walked close to me, his eyes fixed on my pocket, for he had noticed the grapes. At length, finding an olive grove, dark and cool with the long shadows of evening, we sat down by a mossy bank and shared the fruit. Roger ate his whole, pips and all. I spat out my pips into a circle around me, and imagined with satisfaction the flourishing vineyard that would grow up on the spot. When the grapes were finished, I rolled over onto my stomach and, with my chin in my hands, examined the bank behind me. A tiny green grasshopper with a long melancholy face sat twitching his hind legs nervously. A fragile snail sat on a moss sprig, meditating and waiting for the evening dew. A plump scarlet mite the size of a match head struggled like a tubby huntsman through the forest of moss. It was a microscopic world full of fascinating life. As I watched the mite making his slow progress, I noticed a curious thing. Here and there on the green plush surface of the moss were scattered faint circular marks, each the size of a shilling, so faint were they that it was only from certain angles they were noticeable at all. They reminded me of a full moon seen behind thick clouds, a faint circle that seemed to shift and change. I wondered idly what could have made them. They were too irregular, too scattered to be the prints of some beast, and what was it that would walk up an almost vertical bank in such a haphazard manner? Besides, they were not like imprints. I prodded the edge of one of these circles with a piece of grass. It remained unmoved. I began to think the mark was caused by some curious way in which the moss grew. I probed again more vigorously, and suddenly my stomach gave a clutch of tremendous excitement. It was as though my grass stalk had found a hidden spring, for the whole circle lifted up like a trapdoor. As I stared, I saw to my amazement that it was in fact a trapdoor lined with silk, and with a neatly bevelled edge that fitted snugly into the mouth of the silk-lined shaft it concealed. The edge of the door was fastened to the lip of the tunnel by a small flap of silk that acted as a hinge. I gazed at this magnificent piece of workmanship and wondered what on earth could have made it. Peering down the silken tunnel, I could see nothing. I poked my grass stalk down, but there was no response. For a long time I sat staring at this fantastic house. I could see nothing. I poked my grass stalk. Oh no, wait a minute. I've skipped paragraphs from it. For a long time, I sat staring at this fantastic home, trying to decide what sort of beast had made it. I thought that it might be a wasp of some sort, but had never heard of a wasp that fitted its nest with secret doors. I felt that I must get to the bottom of this problem immediately. I would go down and ask George if he knew what this mysterious beast was. Calling Roger, who was busily trying to uproot an olive tree, I set off at a brisk trot. I arrived at George's villa out of breath, bursting with suppressed excitement, giving a perfunctory knock on the door, and dashed in. Only then did I realize he had company. Seated in a chair near him was a figure which, at first glance, I decided must be George's brother, for he also wore a beard. He was, however, in contrast to George, immaculately dressed in a grey flannel suit with waistcoat, a spotless white shirt, a tasteful but sombre tie, and large, solid, highly polished boots. I paused on the threshold, embarrassed, while George surveyed me sardonically. "Good evening," he greeted me. "From the joyful speed of your entry, I take it that you have not come for a little extra tuition?" I apologized for the intrusion and then told George about the curious nests I had found. "Thank heavens you're here, Theodore," he said to his bearded companion. "I shall now be able to hand the problem over to expert hands." "Hardly an expert," mumbled the man called Theodore, deprecatingly. "Jerry, this is Dr. Theodore Stephanides," said George. "He is an expert on practically everything you care to mention, and what you don't mention, he does. He, like you, is an eccentric nature lover. Theodore, this is Jerry Durrell." I said, "How do you do?" politely, but to my surprise the bearded man rose to his feet, stepped briskly across the room, and held out a large, white hand. "Very pleased to meet you," he said, apparently addressing his beard, and gave me a quick, shy glance from twinkling blue eyes. I shook his hand and said I was very pleased to meet him, too. Then we stood in awkward silence while George watched us, grinning. "Well, Theodore," he said at last, And what do you think produced these strange secret passages? Theodore clasped his hands behind his back, lifted himself on his toes several times, his boots squeaking protestingly, and gravely considered the floor. "Well, he said, his words coming slowly and meticulously. "It sounds to me as though they might be the burrows of the trapdoor spider. It is a species which is quite common here in Corfu. That is to say, when I say common, I suppose I have found some 30 or 40 specimens during the time I have been here." "Ah," said George, "trapdoor spiders, eh?" "Yes," said Theodore. "I feel that it's more than probable that that is what they are. However, I may be mistaken." He rose and fell on his toes, squeaking gently, and then he shot me a keen glance. "Perhaps, if they are not too far away, we could go and verify it," he suggested tentatively. "I mean to say, if you have nothing better to do and it's not too far." His voice trailed away on a faintly interrogative note. I said that they were only just up the hill, not really far. Said Theodore. "Don't let him drag you about all over the place, Theodore," said George. "You don't want to be galloped about the countryside." No, not at all," said Theodore. "I was just about to leave, and I can easily walk that way back. It's quite a simple matter for me to cut down through the olive trees and reach Cernoni." He picked up a neat grey Homburg and placed it squarely on his head. At the door he held out his hand and shook George's briefly. "Thank you for a delightful tea," he said, and stumped gravely off along the path by my side. As we walked along, I studied him covertly. He had a straight, well-shaped nose, a humorous mouth lurking in the ash-blonde beard, straight, rather bushy eyebrows, under which his eyes, keen but with a twinkle in them and laughter wrinkles at the corners, surveyed the world. He strode along energetically, humming to himself. When we came to a ditch full of stagnant water, he stopped for a moment and stared down into it, his beard bristling. He said conversationally, "Daphnia magna." He rasped at his beard with his thumb, and then set off down the path again. "Unfortunately," he said to me, "I was coming out to see some people, friends of mine, and so I did not bring my collecting bag with me. It is a pity, for that ditch might have contained something." When we branched off the fairly smooth path we had been travelling along and started up the stony goat track, I expected some sort of protest, but Theodore strode behind me with unabated vigour, still humming. At length we came to the gloomy olive grove, and I led Theodore to the bank and pointed out the mysterious trapdoor. He peered down at it. His eyes narrowed. "Aha," he said. "Yes. Yes." He produced from his waistcoat pocket a tiny penknife, opened it, inserted the point of the blade delicately under the little door, and flipped it back. Yes," he repeated. "Stenisa." He peered down the tunnel, blew down it, and then let the trapdoor fall into place again. Yes, they are the burrows of the trapdoor spiders, he said, but this one does not appear to be inhabited. Generally, the creature will hold on to the trapdoor with her legs, or rather her claws. And she holds on with such tenacity that you have to be careful or you will damage the door trying to force it open. Yes, these are the burrows of the females, of course. The male makes a similar burrow, but it is only about half the size. I remarked that it was the most curious structure I had ever seen. Aha, yes, said Theodore, and they are certainly very curious. A thing that always puzzles me is how the female knows when the male is approaching. I must have looked blank, for he teetered on his toes, shot me a quick look, and went on. The spider, of course, waits inside its burrow until some insect, a fly or a grasshopper or something similar, chances to walk past. They can judge, it seems, whether the insect is close enough to be caught. If it is, the spider pops out of its hole and catches the creature. Now, when the male comes in search for the female, he must walk over the moss to the trapdoor, and I have often wondered why it is that he is not devoured by the female by mistake. It is possible, of course, that his footsteps sound different, or he may make some sort of sound which the female recognizes. We walked down the hill in silence. When we reached the place where the paths forked, I said that I must leave him. Ah, well, I'll say goodbye, he said, staring at his boots. I have enjoyed meeting you. We stood in silence for a moment. Theodore was afflicted with the acute embarrassment that always seemed to overwhelm him when greeting or saying goodbye to someone. He stared at his boots for a moment longer, and then he held out his hand and shook mine gravely. Goodbye, he said. I expect we shall meet again. He turned off and stomped off down the hill, swinging his stick, staring about him with observant eyes. I watched him out of sight and then walked slowly in the direction of the villa. I was at once confused and amazed by Theodore. First, since he was obviously a scientist of considerable repute, and I could have told this by his beard, he was to me a person of great importance. In fact, he was the only person I had met until now who seemed to share my enthusiasm for zoology. Secondly, I was extremely flattered to find that he treated me and talked to me exactly as though I were his own age. I liked him for this, as I was not talked down to by my family, and I took rather a poor view of any outsider who tried to do so. But Theodore not only talked to me as though I were grown up, but also as though I were as knowledgeable as he. The facts he told me about the trapdoor spider haunted me. The idea of the creature crouching in its silken tunnel, holding the door closed with its hooked claws, listening to the movement of the insects on the moss above. What I wondered, did things sound like to a trapdoor spider? I wonder. I could imagine that a snail would trail over the door with a noise like sticking plaster being slowly torn off. A centipede would sound like a troop of cavalry. A fly would patter in brisk spurts, followed by a pause while it washed its hands. A dull rasping sound like a knife grinder at work. The larger beetles, I decided, would sound like steamrollers, while the smaller ones, the ladybirds and others, would probably purr over the moss like clockwork motor cars. Fascinated by this thought, I made my way back home through the darkening fields to tell the family of my new discovery and of my meeting with Theodore. I hoped to see him again, for there were many things I wanted to ask him, but I felt it would be unlikely that he would have very much time to spare for me. I was mistaken. However, for 2 days later, Leslie came back from an excursion into the town and handed me a small parcel. "Met that bearded Johnny," he said laconically. "You know, that scientist bloke. Said this was for you." Incredulously, I stared at the parcel. Surely it couldn't be for me. There must be some mistake, for a great scientist would hardly bother to send me parcels. I turned it over, and there, written on it in neat spidery writing, was my name. I tore off the paper as quickly as I could. Inside was a small box and a letter. "My dear Jerry Durrell, I wondered after our conversation the other day if it might not assist your investigations of the local natural history to have some form of magnifying instrument. I am therefore sending you this pocket microscope in the hope that it will be of some use to you. It is, of course, not a very high magnification, but you will find it sufficient for field work. With best wishes, yours sincerely, Theo Stephanides. P.S. If you have nothing better to do on Thursday, perhaps you would care to come to tea, and I could then show you some of my microscope slides," which is delightful. So this thus concludes chapter 5, A Treasure of Spiders, and I shall no doubt be back tomorrow with chapter 6, The Sweet Spring. So bye for now, and have a wonderful, pleasant day wherever you are in the space-time continuum, whatever time frames you're in, however the weather treats you. Be blessed, be happy, be wild, be free, live your best life according to your individual means and or abilities or aptitudes or predilections, non-harmful predilections, people of Earth, and inspirations and collaborations and co-conspiratorial creations, and lots of love from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. And to those of you celebrating Australia Day or mourning Australia Day, stay safe, don't drink too much, and stay out of the heat. Bye for now.